All right, so listen up. The BMW M4 and the Porsche 911 aren't exactly direct competitors, but one just seems like a natural progression to the other. I remember when my E46 M3 lease was up, I wanted to get into a 911. And it seems like it's the same for a lot of M3 and M4 owners when they want to move on from their cars. Now, why is that? Well, I'm not exactly sure, but there is a BMW M4 competition and a Porsche 911 behind me, so I'm going to try and figure that out. But before doing that, a thank you to Porsche of downtown LA for giving me access to these two cars. If you happen to be interested in something in their inventory, I've left their information in the description. All right, so let's meet these two cars. Over here on the right is a Porsche 911 Carrera S with the PDK transmission in rear-wheel drive configuration. Over here on the left is a BMW M4, again in rear-wheel drive configuration, painted in this beautiful Isle of Man green. This is my favorite color on the BMW M4. Now, one of the biggest differences between these two cars, price. The Carrera S over here on the right starts at $131,000. The BMW M4, $83,000 in the rear-wheel drive configuration, and if my math is correct, that is a $48,000 difference before options. So let's get on with the styling first. And the most simplest and most common way a car attracts a buyer is its styling. Now, this is subjective, so I'm not going to ramble too much about it, but these two cars have kind of gone in two different directions recently. The Porsche 911 maintains its classic lines with oval headlights and just an overall unmistakable look. And you could argue that it's practically looked the same for the past 60 years. And the M4, well, not so much. The drastic changes to the front end of the M4 initially had car enthusiasts scratching their heads. Although I will say that I've been seeing more of them around recently. So does that mean people have come around to the styling? I'm not sure. What do you think? All right, so now I'm in the interior of the M4. I'm going to start here and then jump in the 911 right after and give you my immediate sense of the differences. Starting off with the M4's quality. So this is a nicely put together interior. There are no squeaks, there's no rattles. This car has about 10,000 miles on it, and it's a pretty, it's still practically a new car, so not surprised that it's in good condition. But there are two leather packages. There's a extended leather and a full leather, which gives you additional leather up on the dash, on the upper and lower dash, and some other parts of the car. But the overall quality is very good. Otherwise, the carbon fiber looks very cool. The carbon fiber on the steering wheel looks cool. The red M1 and M2 buttons are very cool. And just the overall size of the M4. So let's talk about that here for just a second. The seat is very, very comfortable. There's two seats available for the M4. There's this regular seat, and then there's the carbon bucket. Please do not buy the carbon bucket seats unless all you're going to do with your M4 is track it, because that seat, even though it's one of the cooler seats out there visually, aesthetically, it's just not comfortable to sit in, and on a daily driving basis, it's just not good. I personally don't like it. That's my opinion. But this seat, the regular seat, is very comfortable. I'm 5'11". I have plenty of headroom above me. Legroom is also very good. The overall front size cabin is good. The back seats, even though they're still coupe back seats, you can kind of manage and make somebody sit back there, as opposed to in the 911, it's really a two-seater car unless you have children sitting in the back seats. You can probably fit some adults back here. Now, in terms of technology, you have two 12.3-inch screens. This is the prior generation setup running the prior generation of iDrive, and that is not a problem because I personally prefer this generation of iDrive. Yes, the widescreen in the new generation looks cooler aesthetically, but me personally, I don't really like the newer version of iDrive. I feel like through some iterations it has some improvements, but this one, I don't know, my personal preference, I like this one a little bit better. Now, the last thing is cargo space, because we're talking about daily drivability for both of these cars. The M4 has about 13 cubic feet of space compared to the Porsche's 4.5 cubic feet of space. Now remember, this has a trunk, bigger back seats, and the Porsche only has a frunk because obviously the engine is in the back, and you have some back seats that are marginal at best in terms of storage. So that's it for the interior of the M4. Now let's jump into the 911 and I'll give you my impressions. All right, so now I'm in the 911 and let me give you my immediate reaction jumping over from the BMW M4. So the differences, it's a little smaller in here. The dash is closer to me as a driver. Even though it's not claustrophobic in the 911, it's definitely smaller in here. Getting into the car, you have to kind of crouch down a little bit lower to get in. It's not as easy as it is in the M4. The seat itself, this is the base seat. It's not as cushiony, for the lack of a better term, compared to the seat in the BMW. I believe the 14 and the 18-way seat might close the gap because those are more comfortable or cushionier seats. I'm going to use the same term compared to the base seat, but the M4 seat is definitely more comfortable. In terms of quality, now this is somewhat unfair because the Porsche that I'm sitting in has a full leather package, so it's got more leather on the dash, more leather on the lower dash, stitching on the doors, on the dash and everything. So the quality in here seems much, much better. But from what I remember, I've driven partial leather interior Porsches, and it's still a little bit better, not much better, but slightly better. In terms of the upper dash and things, the seats are all partial leather to begin with for both of the cars. So that's one of the immediate differences in terms of quality. So that's kind of it. Oh, the technology, I forgot about that. Now, the Porsche kind of takes a hybrid approach. You do have a center screen for your infotainment system, but in front of you, while in the BMW the gauges are all digital, in the Porsche there's a analog tachometer, and that is so cool. It's a genius move by Porsche. The only thing is you can't see the entire gauge or the side flanking gauges. That's always a problem, or it's been a problem for the 992 generation and the 911. But which one do I like best? I don't know. I kind of like that analog tachometer in the Porsche, but the software and all of that stuff, it's a little bit of a toss-up. I feel like, as I mentioned, in the prior generation of BMW's iDrive, I like that more than the new one. And the PCM, this generation of it, I didn't like it before, but after iterations, and I believe in 2022 they made it a little bit simpler, I feel like PCM is now a little bit ahead of the iDrive. When you look at it new for new, I like the newer version of PCM compared to the newer version or the newest version of BMW's iDrive. So that's it as far as my immediate reaction jumping from the BMW into the Porsche. Now let's jump back into the BMW and see how that drives, and then we'll get back into the Porsche and then compare the differences. All right, so we're going to start it off in the M4 first, and let me rattle off some of the performance metrics. So this is a 3-liter inline 6-cylinder twin turbocharged engine generating 503 horsepower and 479 pound-feet of torque. If you've been keeping up with the news, you know that the refreshed 2025 M4 is going to generate 20 more horsepower, so 523. But I think the internet has pretty much debunked the mystery that these cars, both of these cars, the M4 and the 911, are underrated from the factory. So I don't think anybody, whether you go M4 or 911, you're gonna feel a shortage of speed and acceleration. Both of these cars are brutally fast accelerating cars. In terms of acceleration, so 0 to 60 in this car, 3.5 seconds. It is a little bit on the heavier side. This is the rear wheel drive car. The X-Drive weighs almost 4,000 pounds. This is around 3,800 and change, almost 500 pounds more than a 911. So obviously that's contributed to this being a full size, I guess, coupe car. But nonetheless, this is available in rear-wheel drive like this car. You can get the competition package in all-wheel drive as well. Manual transmission is a slightly less horsepower, which sucks actually, because if you think about it, the enthusiasts want more horsepower. So give the enthusiasts what they want. You're offering a manual. BMW, give them the same amount of horsepower. And then the automatic is an 8-speed automatic, which in my opinion should be a double clutch, only because this is an M car and I'm being a double clutch snob, because I feel like double clutches are more associated to sports cars, and this is a M4. It should have a double clutch, but I digress. I'm harping too much about it. Magnetic ride, limited slip differential, and you can get carbon ceramics just like you can in the 911. So let's turn this thing on. Has a nice bark at startup, and let's go for a drive. Let's put the car in setup. Let's go Sport Plus, Sport Plus, Sport, Sport. So engine, chassis, steering, braking. And if you remember, or maybe if you don't remember, the M4 has a brake-by-wire system. So you can tune the sensitivity of the brake, which was very weird the first time I drove this car. Now, let's test the acceleration in the M4. Remember, this is the rear-wheel drive, so it's not going to get as good as a launch as a all-wheel drive car, but I'm not going to use launch control. I'm just going to brake boost it a little bit, and let's go. Oh, wheel spin. Oh, I forgot to put it in manual shift mode there. So I'm going to go ahead and turn back around and do it again. But I could already tell that this car, the memories are coming back. I've driven this car separately, independent of this review. So let's go ahead and put it back in manual shift mode, down to first. Let's stop again, and let's go. Wheel spin. Oh, the pop. Oh yeah, that sounds really nice. The pop that's generated on the upshift, that nice bark, nicely tuned by BMW. I really like it. And you can totally feel the back end of this car moving around. And I guess if you really wanted to get the fun aspect of it, this feels different than the X-Drive car. And just right off the bat, this is the first time I'm driving the rear-wheel drive car. Just right off the bat, just for that lone feeling of having the, I guess, a little bit of loosiness back there, makes it a little bit more fun. So let's test the speed again. But once it grips, oh my God, it pushes you back into your seat. Oh, wow. This is a severely, severely fast accelerating car. The underrated fact of this car is immediately noticeable once you drive it and you put the hammer down. The rear-wheel drive aspect of it does have a shortcoming. The traction isn't as good. So if you do want that max acceleration, obviously the all-wheel drive is probably going to be your best bet. But once this thing grips and it hooks up, man, does it move. Holy crap. And oh my God, this is such a fast car, man. All right, reminded that this is a unbelievably quick car. Acceleration is not going to be a concern in this car, that's for sure. Now, let me talk about the automatic and then I'm going to talk about the PDK once I'm in that car. So this is one of the things that I was complaining about earlier. The M4 should have a double clutch. And let me tell you why. When you drive in manual shift mode and you pull on the paddle, if you are not in the fastest shifting mode, there is a delay in the shift. No matter where the throttle position is, I noticed that it doesn't immediately give me the shift. And I'm in an M4. I want immediate shifts when I'm using the paddles. So it kind of sucks that you have to remember to be in the fastest shift mode. Obviously there are M1 and M2 and you can tune it to be in the fastest shifting mode. But I'll explain in the 911, the PDK is just always fast. No matter, there's no mode, it's just fast. You pull on the paddle, it's there, upshift or downshift. But that's one of the things that I can argue for the 911 or the M4 getting a double clutch. Now, in terms of sporty driving, okay, so this car does feel properly stiff. When I am in Sport Plus, you can absolutely feel the difference between the chassis being in comfort in Sport and in Sport Plus. It does get stiff. Now, the nice thing about the M4 is that the seat is very, very comfortable. and it kind of counterbalances some of the stiffness that you're going to get in or coming in from the suspension. Otherwise, the steering feedback in Sport feels pretty natural. Actually, it's one of the few sportier cars that I've driven where in Sport it doesn't get too artificially weighted. I don't remember it being this way in the xDrive. Maybe it's a rear-wheel drive thing, or maybe my memory is failing me, but I'm really liking the way the steering feels. Now, one thing that is constant about the M4 and even the M3 is that from a driving dynamic standpoint, they are absolutely wonderful cars. They are so balanced and so nice to drive when you're driving spiritedly, when you're driving fast. They're just a pure joy to drive quickly. And it's very confidence inspiring, this M4 and the M3. So from a sporty standpoint, I have no concerns or issues about the M4. Now, from a daily drivability standpoint, you put this in efficient, comfort, and it turns into a BMW. And I guess this is the benefit of the underpinnings of this car being a BMW or being tuned by BMW, because you drive this thing and it just lofts along. Yes, you do have a little burblier exhaust, and the suspension does feel sportier, and so does the steering feedback. But I mean, you could absolutely drive this.
I need a connection to a Bluetooth device.
iDrive kicking in there. You can absolutely drive this on a daily basis and not even flinch. Cross-country, day-to-day driving, pick up your kids even though the back seat isn't the best, go to work, come back, I mean, go to dinners. It's just a wonderful car to be driven on a daily basis. And I remember the E46 M3, I really got into M cars because I researched and I bought an E46 M3. And I remember way back then, it was always the M cars are sporty cars you can drive on the track, and you can also drive them on a daily basis. And even to this point, I can see that the M4, the M philosophy is still there. You have to be able to drive an M car on a daily basis and be able to flip a couple modes and switches and drive it fast confidently. And this thing does it very, very nicely. So that's pretty much it on the M4 in terms of its driving dynamics. Now let's flip over and go into the 911 and see what that thing drives like. All right, so now we are in the 911 Carrera S. So let me rattle off some of the performance metrics, some similarities and differences. Of course, this is a rear-wheel drive platform with a rear-mounted engine compared to the BMW's rear-wheel drive front-mounted engine. Of course, both cars are available, this with the 4S in the all-wheel drive and the BMW xDrive. The engine configuration and size is almost the same with some differences, obviously. So both same size, 3 liter, same number of turbos, twin turbocharged, same number of cylinders, 6. But this has a boxer 6-cylinder, flat 6-cylinder compared to the BMW's inline straight 6-cylinder. And horsepower and torque differences: 443 horsepower here, 390 pounds-feet of torque. That represents roughly like 60 horsepower and about 90 pounds-feet of torque compared to the BMW. And the advantage that this has, which catches up in terms of its acceleration, is the weight difference. That 400 to 500 pound difference compared to the BMW. 0 to 60 happens in 3.3 seconds in this car compared to the BMW's 3.8 with the rear wheel drive and 3.5 with the xDrive. But as I mentioned when I was driving the BMW, there is no shortage of speed here. The acceleration and the power figures of this car far exceed what you will need on a daily driving situation or in daily driving situations. Now, this does also have adaptive shocks. It also has carbon ceramic brakes. It also has a mechanical, well, this one has an electronic limited slip differential because of the PDK. The manual cars have a mechanical limited slip differential. Now, let's go ahead and turn this thing on and go for a drive. Ignition, there's a difference here, is on the left. And of course, another major difference is in terms of the driving experience. The engine and exhaust note comes from behind you. So that in and of itself maybe is the reason why a lot of people like the 911 or want the 911, is because of that mid-engine or rear engine experience, or the noise coming from behind you. Because of course this is unique. It's pretty much unique to sports cars only. So let's go ahead and test the acceleration very quickly. Manual shift mode, put it in Sport Plus, and I'm not going to use launch control. Let me turn on Sport Response. That'll give me 20 seconds of increased throttle response at full power. Oh man, oh my god, wow. Oh man, these Carrera S's, or just the 911s in general, are just so fast. Let's go back again, and then we'll come back in the same direction, and then I will tell you what I'm feeling here. Let's go from second gear, and once it gets rolling, just like most twin turbocharged engines or most turbo engines, once you get full power out of the engine in the higher RPM band, these things just fly and they push you back into your seat. And I think the acceleration numbers and the horsepower figures are just confirmed that they're sandbagged. They're completely underrated, because this car with this much weight and this much power, 443 horsepower, like, it shouldn't be this fast, but it's unbelievably fast, as is the M4, of course. But let's go one more time, and then I'll tell you what I'm feeling here. Sport response on again. Oh yeah, oh man, yeah. Okay, so I drove it here before this a couple times, and just this immediate sensation, I feel like the 911 is faster. And let me tell you why I think that is. Maybe it's just a placebo thing, and because in terms of acceleration, they're pretty much the same, within a couple tenths of a second of each other. But let me tell you why I feel this feels different or feels faster. So, a couple things. The engine behind you contributes vastly to it feeling faster, at least in my opinion. The PDK shifts much faster and much more crisply than the automatic, and I'll touch PDK automatic more here in just a second. The overall experience is also different here. In terms of sporty driving, let me turn manual mode off and let me go back in normal. So in terms of sporty driving, it's just completely different. This car feels tighter. It feels lower to the ground. Well, indeed, it is lower to the ground. It's smaller in here. The cabin tidiness or coziness, for the lack of a better term, contributes to that sport driving feel. And mechanically, I feel that this car grips a lot harder, and that makes it accelerate faster. Even though both are rear-wheel drive acceleration cars, the weight balance in this car and it being rear bias contributes greatly to a better acceleration feeling in this car than it does in the M4. This car just sits down in the back. You can totally feel it sitting down, gripping and going. You get very little, I guess, play in the back compared to the M4, where I mentioned there's a little bit of happiness going on back there, some emotion, some excitement. Not that this is less exciting, it just delivers it differently, in a little bit more profound and a little bit more, I guess, tighter way, more serious way, less drama. But in terms of acceleration and excitement, this feels a little faster. I don't know, maybe about 5 to 10% difference if you were to drive them back to back. This does feel faster, but is it crazy amounts faster? Probably not. But what you're really going to feel is the way the power delivery is and the overall environment in which you're accelerating. So I hope that makes sense. But in terms of some of the other dynamics, the suspension is stiffer. It's a little less comfortable than the BMW. The seat is still comfortable, but as I mentioned earlier on in the interior portion of the review, it's not as cushiony. It's a little stiffer at initial get in and go. But eventually, once you get used to it, yeah, it is a comfortable seat. Now, in terms of daily driving, because we talked about that in the M4 and how exceptional that was, the whole M brand philosophy, and being able to drive it on a daily basis and take it to a track or take it into a canyon road. This one, I feel, is good, but when you compare it to the M4, it's not as good as the M4, because the M4 is derived from a different platform. It's on the 4 Series platform, maybe even, I think it's on the 3 Series platform. And that is a daily driver car. People use that more often, or it's viewed upon as more of a daily driver car. While in this, it's a dedicated sports car platform with 2 seats, even though there's 4 seats in the 911. Let's be real, it's really a 2-seater car. It's just a different dynamic. And again, not that the 911 is bad for daily driving. Many people daily drive 911s and they love them. But comparing it objectively, and if your measure of daily drivability is comfort first and just, I don't know, I guess usability and overall environment, the M4 does it a little bit better. So those are my overall thoughts in terms of the driving dynamic differences. Now let's wrap it up with some final thoughts. All right, so let's wrap this thing up. Major kudos to the BMW M4. The performance gap between these two cars is much less than what I remember it being in the E46 M3 generation compared to the 997 Porsche 911 generation. The M4 is a serious performance car. Now, why would you buy an M4? Because it's $48,000 cheaper than a 911 Carrera S. It's probably easier to drive on a daily basis, is more practical, has more room on the interior, and more cargo space. Why would you buy a 911? Because it's a true sports car experience. Something that cannot be delivered in the BMW M4 you get in the 911, and all of the performance gains that come with a true sports car architecture. Now, to wrap it all up, why do so many M3 and M4 owners want to move into 911s once they're done with their cars? And I thought of 4 major reasons amongst all the other things you can argue, but these are my top 4. So first thing, you just couldn't afford a 911. Second thing, you were apprehensive about getting into a sports car experience. So you went into the halfway point. You bought a sporty coupe like an M4. You drove your sporty coupe, and then it just seems like a natural fit once you're ready for the sports car experience, given that these two cars are made by German manufacturers with German manufacturing philosophies and German driving dynamics. The natural fit seems like going from an M4 into a 911 if you want the sports car experience. The second item, or the third item, which kind of ties into the second item, is our goals or our aspirations. So you made some money, you bought an M4, you set a goal, you set aspirations to move up in life, to make more money so you can afford a 911, and you wanted that sports car experience. Again, that natural fit from the second point is the Porsche 911. Not, at least in my opinion, you don't go from an M4 into a Lamborghini or into a Ferrari or into a McLaren. Those are more exotic oriented. Going from an M4 to a 911, and then once you get into your 911, you set further goals out in front of you, and then you jump into the more exotic cars like the Ferraris and the Lamborghinis. And finally, this is more of a trivial topic, and I don't know, I'll just leave it out there, see what you think. Brand snobbery. Quite simple. For the people who are interested in that, the Porsche name carries a little bit more weight than the BMW name does. So that's pretty much it. If you have any questions about these two cars, please feel free to leave me a comment down below or send me a message on Instagram at DriveSteady. If you have decided that you want a Porsche 911 but you cannot decide which transmission to get, 7-speed manual or 8-speed PDK, here's a video to my right that I made that will probably help you. Or if you've decided you want to get an M4 but you can't decide M3 or M4, here are 2 reviews to my left for those 2 cars. Now, thank you to Porsche of downtown LA. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching this video. Until next time, drive steady.